Hi, it is Sarah Jane, and it's one more day. It's my daughter's birthday today, and I have missed her. I've missed her a lot. She's gone fishing on the Zambezi with her dad, and I've been alone, home alone, and feeling really, really bad. I got a huge head cold and a really sore throat. And maybe it's the upcoming thunder moon or the birth of my child today. Hi Violet, hi Teresa. 11 years ago, my little girl came into the world. No natural childbirth for me. She got cut out, but I'm happy to say that she is healthy and vital. Unlike the moth, her wings unfolded beautifully. And I kind of wondered if you know that story about the Emperor Moth and what I know about being home alone with a massive sore throat and experiencing that throat pain is something that I haven't had for ages, in fact years, I think, since I last had a sore throat like this, where I can hardly swallow. And I don't know, it just feels really, really still outside, and I haven't been enjoying the time that I have to just rest. If any of you that are workaholics, I know a couple of you are, and you probably know that one of the hardest things to do is rest, and it got me thinking about growing pains and healing crises and spiritual awakenings that are all kind of proof that pain and aggravation, just like that Emperor Moth story, is worth it in the end. And I was watching, I don't know what it's called, The Great Antique Show or something. I caught a bit of it on the television last night, and there was a woman that had this beautiful, beautiful brooch that was just encrusted with diamonds that was actually a moth. And the man who was evaluating it was saying that if it was a butterfly, it would be worth more money. Hi Celeste, nice to see you here. Because people love butterflies and people don't like moths, which is really about the light and the shadow, and our perception of the darkness being less than the light, or the butterfly being more important or more beautiful than a moth. And if you've ever seen a emperor moth or any kind of moth, they're beautiful, and they really are fascinating to watch, how they're just attracted to the light, and even though they know that flame is going to burn them, they can't but help go toward the light. And in the end, it really doesn't matter what caused me to be a little morose and a little deep down. I went really deep down, more than usual. And what does matter is this thing about humanity, you know, where we're not willing to sit with the deep down, where we're not willing to sit in the dark and shift our boundaries, and this sort of fine art of saying no to being busy, saying no to really protect that really sacred, holy, beautiful place that really is the deep down. And protecting it, you know, really protecting it. And giving it time. You know, sitting with pain isn't something that any of us really like to do, but the deep down place of really connecting with your heart is one of the most brutal and beautiful places that you can be. And one of the kindest things that you can give yourself is to just stay there and access your true nature and listen to yourself, your thoughts and the messiness, and when we're not willing to engage in that listening to yourself, to your deep down, you don't really get that alignment with your calling into the world, and you don't really get to make space for the light or what's coming and for what is, and saying no to shit, and when you're sick, allowing yourself to just rest and know that the world isn't going to stop if you do. So either way, I wanted to tell you the story about the great Emperor Moth, and maybe you've heard it, but it's a beautiful story. And it kind of goes that there was a hunter that came across this little cocoon, and it was the cocoon of a great emperor moth. And he didn't want to miss this beautiful event of seeing this moth come out of the cocoon. So he decided to go back and check on this moth. Thank you for the love. Thank you for the hearts. He decided to keep going back every day into the forest to go and watch this cocoon. And day after day, he'd go back and he'd check on the cocoon, and he waited for what seemed to be like an absolute eternity. And the moth finally began to emerge from this tiny little opening that it had made in the cocoon. And the progress was really slow because it takes a lot of energy for this moth, who was just sort of struggling to get out of this hole that really looked way too small for this big, great emperor moth. And after some time, it started to poke its legs out from the outer coverings, and then it really started to look like it was making progress, and then everything just stopped. Everything just stopped. And it almost looked to the man that the moth had given up. He'd just given up because it was just too hard to get out of this cocoon. And hours passed, and more hours passed, and the man just saw no progress. Maybe you can relate to feeling maybe that way in your life at the moment, where like this man, he was so worried, and he was thinking that this moth was going to die and that it had given up. So he decided that he was going to help the moth to get out of this miserable suffering that he was in, where he couldn't get out of the cocoon. So he grabbed his knife, thinking he was going to help the moth, and he carefully started to cut the side of the cocoon so that the moth could just come out with ease. And instead of this moth coming out and being beautiful and flying out of the cocoon, it fell to the ground because its wings hadn't developed, and its body was really engorged with fluid. So it had this big fat body and these tiny little shriveled wings, and it couldn't fly. So it fell to the ground, and then it died. And what this man didn't realize, and the moral of the story is that just like the moth, we have to struggle through what sometimes looks like impassable obstacles and challenges. That we have to sort of wiggle ourselves, and there's no wiggle room. And it hurts. It hurts to push through a space that's so tiny. But the moth needed to squeeze its body, just like we do, through this tiny little hole in the cocoon, so that it could force all this fluid from its bodies into its wings and allow the wings to sort of develop into this large, beautiful, functional adult moth wings. And because this man who seemingly wanted to help, hi Tammy, seemingly wanted to help this moth to hurry up and get through the suffering, he denied the moth the chance to develop in in good time, and it actually came at the expense of a very short life. So this beautiful emperor moth never really got to be a beautiful emperor moth and fly off toward the light. And if you ask me, this story is one of my favorites because it really, for me, the moth is the great transformer. It's the hero's journey. It's the mighty motivational speaker of the world. And, I'm sure that moth's struggle isn't exaggerated. When you watch it, I remember we used to have silkworms as children. And it did seem like forever before those little worms wove those beautiful little cocoons, and then it all went really, really quickly. And then they went into that mushy place in the cocoon where you couldn't force them, and I'm sure that we did. We tried to pull them out before their time, and they never got to live. And thank you, Debbie. It's a beautiful story, and I'm delighted for you to be here. So, you know, why am I telling you about the moth, and who really cares? I think it is because I've seen so much struggle going on around me. I've been struggling a little bit more than is necessary with this thing of just resting. As simple as it seems, when you're creating your own economy, when you're running a home, when you have children to grow and businesses to grow and things to birth into the world, we often want to force ourselves to go through and get there before we've actually appreciated the present moment of what is being created, even though you can't see it inside the cocoon. And, you know, I've seen so many people, and I've seen this myself, where things emerge from the chrysalis, and it's brutal to watch. It's brutal to watch people birthing through the birth canal like a child. You know, if a baby doesn't get to take those contractions and push itself out, its spine doesn't get to uncurl, and we're always wanting to kind of force things. And to be honest, I'm exhausted by watching myself and so many of my clients trying to force something that they're not ready for yet, or that isn't fully developed, or perhaps we're not fully aligned on those three threads of body and mind and spirit, or what I talk about is the 5 levels of commitment, that, you know, you can be committed to emotional and the spiritual part of committing to write a book or do what you came here to do in the world. But if you don't have the financial commitment, if you don't have the physical commitment where you're looking after your body and you're resting and you're getting good sleep and you're doing all the things so that your body, your beautiful horse, gets to gallop off and do amazing things and impact people and change the world, not just do you miss out, but the world misses out on your gifts. And I think that that's the human life cycle, really. That's the art of being in this messy, beautiful, brutal, very soft body, like a horse, that's so sensitive to environmental changes and things shifting and changing, that the message is really, really clear, that through your resilience, we rise up, we move toward the light that's already been inside of us. I've had to stop forcing stuff. I'm learning after a long time. Oh, Debbie, I'm so happy to hear that. And I'm really choosing to listen more to that too, because we just think that we're superwomen, or what's this new movie that's come out, you know, Wonder Woman. What if we don't need our capes? What if we don't need to be anything other than know that in the ebb and flow of life, there's a time and a place for everything. And if you feel that you're not giving yourself that, eventually your body's going to say no. I fell off a horse on my birthday, May. So what's that? You know, almost 6 weeks, and I've found it really challenging to just slow down and rest. And now I've got this, you know, really big head cold that's really, really forced me to not speak so much and go inward and go deep down and really celebrate that the suffering is temporary. You know, the growing pains are so necessary, and yes, they hurt, and yes, we'd rather avoid it, but it's all temporary and it's all for your growth. You know, my growing children, if you have any, you know, again, I was reminded today, my daughter, she's my biggest growth partner. And there are days when I just want to go yelling and screaming with my own inner child and get as far away from her as possible, because I don't often like the dark that I see mirrored back to me and her. So, you know, terrible things may have happened to you. And at the end of the day, you're here to tell the story. Even though those insurmountable obstacles at the time, you thought you couldn't carry on. Just like that moth, you took a rest, and sometimes it looks like death, because it is. It's the death of the old story. It's the death of you. And all of that's made you who you are. And I know it's a little weird and mixed up and scary and crazy and amazing all at the same time. To really recognize that we have so little control, don't we, over our own human development and our own humanity. It's just a remarkable, it's miraculous. Have you not alone? Oh my gosh, 5 children, that's amazing, Debbie. I take my mother hat off to you and open my heart. And it's just incredible how our children choose us, and through them we actually grow. So I always say, Thalia is my growth partner, and I'm sure yours have been too. Past 2 days, everything has been good. Yeah, we have to let go of the things that no longer serve us, including people and concepts and thoughts and emotions. And sometimes we need to stay in the grief of what that's going to look like when it moves out longer than society wants us to stay there, or cultural norms or morality. And we don't live in a world that wants us to live in our hearts. You know, it's all head stuff. So I know that this sort of idea of oh, excuse me, this idea that all pain and aggravation is something to be avoided. I really get sitting in the pain, having no distractions, having nobody else to take care of except my own needs over the last week. It's been a very uncomfortable place, and I have fought it, you know, literally been fighting and resisting it, and you can't avoid pain. You know, you can't go around pain, you can't go around grief. Hi Kelly, nice to see you here. So, you know, wherever you sort of find yourself today, just know that even though those situations that you've lived through may not have been what you wanted, or were painful, or weren't ideal, there's a gift, there's a purpose behind them. And depending on how spiritual you are, you could say that you needed to have those experiences in order to be here and be the person that you birthed into this world knowing that you were, and then we forget along the way, or it's knocked out of us or programmed out of us. So in the unlearning, it's going to be painful. You know, but everything is here to teach us and to grow us and to make us into the person that we know we came here to be. And we just sometimes forget that we know that. So, you know, if that doesn't float your boat, you can just shrug your shoulders and say that's enough, and you can give up and say life is too hard and too rough. And some days I do, you know. I've always sort of had a hard time with that. That in those sort of moments where pain and depression feel like they're swallowing me up, that I would rather they swallow me up, because it just feels like, oh my God, it's too much. It's just too much, and it would be easier to just stop caring. And then I ask myself, you know, what if this isn't here to hurt me? What if it's here to help me? What if there's nothing to lose and so much to gain? That everything is a gift, and everything is medicine, and everything can wake us up out of this sort of dreamy, sleepy place that isn't fully engaged and isn't fully present, so that our soul can evolve out loud. No matter how much dark or light this moment seems to be cloaked in right now, it's all made up of stardust. And I hope I'm not shouting, because my ears feel like they're in cotton wool today. But just know, you know, it's all the light of consciousness. And I think one of the greatest holds on keeping us in this sort of impossibility thinking is being lost in the mind, being lost in the logical thinking, instead of getting your mind to work for you. So a lot of people say, you know, that we're logical, we're realistic, you know, be realistic. But that's not where creation is. That's not where imagination lives. That's not where growth is, in being realistic. That's kind of like killing your dreams. It's like literally giving up on yourself. And our decisions and our choices, they're emotionally based, aren't they? I think you're moving on to better things. Ah, it's got your attention. Hell yes, it has. Thank you, Debbie. Yeah, it's another growing pain. There's so much amazing stuff that's available to us, and you know, every person, every connection is an asset, and yet we are sort of walking through life in this numbed down, disassociated place, and we're starving for connection. So when you start feeling those feelings in every fiber of your being, that's when you can really start to shift, and that starts cracking that foundation of impossibility thinking. You know, it's like, I can't. I spoke about I can't the other day. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. And it starts with leaning towards that everything is working for you. And it's up to you to be awake enough and aware enough to actually see it when it's right under your nose. You know, they're called blind spots for a reason, because you can't see it when you're in it. So allowing yourself to rest, allowing yourself to stay there a little bit longer and take one step at a time. When you're trying to change things too fast, that's when we get ourselves in a mess. That's when we get depressed, because I always say this, but people don't break your heart. You don't break your own heart. You break your own expectation. And that's really what, for me, depression is. You know, it's the gift of being present, to look at where am I holding myself to impossibly high standards or unrealistic expectations. Because I don't want to be realistic. I want to be the best that I can be. And it's what I call sort of surregoing. I've coined that as my term of futuring. To act as what if, as if it's already happened. And I go into every single detail of what I see and who's with me and the timeline. And I'll be speaking more about how I do that, because it's different to manifesting through the law of attraction, because you actually you start to fold your timeline. And the things that I've had on my timeline for 5 or 10 or 30 years from now, they're really happening now. And I'm aware of it because I've seen it in my mind as if it's already happened. So when you start, at that impossibility thinking, and you start, and then shift that to, well, what if I can? And what if it's already happened? And go into the detail of it. Then you go from saying, I can't do this. This is too hard. I'd rather just die in this cocoon, to looking at what else is possible. How can I make that possible? You know, what if you start doing that right now? Because you're looking toward a new direction, and you're actually starting to rewire. That's the neurophysiology of mind mapping, is that when you actually imagine it in reality, this is where top sportsmen, they see themselves running the race and winning. They see themselves breaking the records, because your mind and your nervous system don't know the difference between what's imaginal and what you're actually manifesting or creating in the physical. So the more you do this, you start rewiring your brain, and you start creating new neural pathways, you know, better roads in your brain to help you to get toward your desired result faster, and not always faster, but with more ease, without so much struggle. And that requires pausing, that requires restoring, that requires resting, you know, because that's part of the journey. So when we start thinking more toward possibility, does it make sense that then you can start to make these 1 degree incremental shifts towards probability? You change the odds when you bet on yourself, you know. So that was just a little bit of my thought, all motivated by a beautiful diamond moth brooch that I saw, and my daughter's birthday, and rebirthing, and death, and the whole full circle of life that's so beautiful. It's walking the spiral path. So, you know, when you just open up to more awareness of that, of the difficult, of the challenging, of the effort that I've been speaking about, it's that effort of being present. It's that effort of resting that so many of us entrepreneurs and super women out there don't allow themselves to have. Hi Teresa, nice to see you here. We're almost done, so you'll have to go back to listen to my story about the Emperor Moth. But just remember, you know, just allow yourself to rest, push pause, just stop. And just ask yourself what really matters now. Because we usually find ourselves aligning with the most efficient direction that we want to face. But that's where the hard effort comes in. You know, it's total awareness. It's being awake in the world and walking through that living legacy of just being in the moment of presence and patience and persistence that leads you to a purpose that's a full, rich, beautiful, messy life rather than being on autopilot. And it's a pattern interrupt too of mediocrity or complacency, or maybe where you've been too comfortable in the habits. So look at where you're willing to make yourself intentionally uncomfortable as you sort of stretch your wings and enter into a new cycle, a rebirthing of sorts. And know that that's the only thing you get to control is how you choose to respond or react. And yes, bad thoughts come up and bad things are going to happen. And yes, there's a lot of uncertainty in our lives. But there's a big difference for me now in knowing that depression really is to go down, to go deep down. Excuse me. And just sit there. And that it's all for me. And I understand my happiness and my level of fulfillment and pleasure is all intrinsically woven into the threads of pain, as well as much as and important as the ecstasy. So butterfly and moth, you know, it's the light and the dark of everything. And all we have to do is pivot and focus on where you want to be and where you're going and what you want. That you're the author of your life story. You're the authority, nobody else is. So relinquishing the thoughts that take you away from your heart, that take you away from deep down, that's when you want to surrego, you know, act as if you've already changed it. Use your magic, use your alchemy. And then rest, because rest is hard and it's necessary. And sometimes my future self, I can't hear her, but she does thank me when I finally do listen. And that's kind of what I did today. Had a bit of vitamin B shot and I rested. I closed my eyes, which is something I never do during the day because I'm always afraid that I won't sleep at night, which is just a very interesting point of view. But being less busy has allowed me to get more focused and stronger in my boundaries and stronger in my deep down. And it's brave and it's beautiful to sit with your sensitive bits. So just ask yourself, you know, where are you making pain wrong? Where are you making rest wrong? The world will go on without you. So I choose to believe the pain is all a gift. It's temporary and the struggle is optional. So sometimes we might not understand, we don't need to, why life is happening through you like that. But it's our true nature to move like that moth towards the flame because there's pleasure there. And yet it might kill you. And that's the only thing that we can be sure of, is that death comes to all of us. And move toward the pleasure. Oh, hello, my cat. My blue cat's just come in the window. So acknowledge that pain grows you up and pay loving attention to what you feel deep down. Know what you know. Love what you don't love about it. And just love it anyway. Because in those deep down achy spaces, when you acknowledge and love it with compassion and kindness and you tread gently down there on your heart, the whole world changes. And it changes to make room, like Debbie said, for the next thing, while you're enjoying the present moment as if it is the last moment that you'll have, because you don't know. And as you do, as you go about enjoying the rest of your day in this moment, just remember to keep hold of those 3 fragile threads. The web that has no weaver, that holds your body, your spiritual body, your mental body in this beautiful, soft, vulnerable, horse-like body in the physical, so that you can enjoy the moment, enjoy the ride, and pay closer attention to the relationships, not only with yourself and your body and your business and your relationships out inside, but in your relationships outside. And that's really how we get to master the mastery, right? The hero's journey. So may you master the physical from the inside out, and just keep taking the next steps towards living your legacy. And I'm going to leave you with that and go and take my next step towards my bed, so that I can lay down my pounding heart, my pounding head, and hydrate my body and give it the rest that I have been refusing to give it all week. So happy Thursday, everyone. Lots of love. Bye. Mwah.